Before I talk about this, I wanted to just give, since this is a basketball podcast, there was recently an update about the confirmed members of Team USA, and I'll do that in a different segment. But for now, like what we know, the confirmed members for Team USA are Drew Holiday, Kevin Durant, LeBron James, Stephen Curry, Joel Embiid, and Jason Tatum. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I'll probably cover it tomorrow in a different segment, but those are the confirmed players for Team USA that we know of. They were just confirmed earlier, like 30 minutes ago. So just wanted to point that out there. And also March Madness is coming. So usually like on this podcast I talk about like NBA basketball, but I'm definitely going to talk about March Madness and all the games that will go down then, because it's March Madness. How could I not talk about it? But let's go ahead and let's talk about how the NBA is officially reviewing whether the game is being tilted a little bit too far on like the offensive side of the ball. And now most casuals of the NBA, they believe that this is already true, that the game is while the game, yes, is completely different from what it was back in the 80s and like the 90s. It's much more offensive heavy now. And if you're a casual, it's very easy to notice that it's much more offensive heavy this year. And it's like, if it feels as if like this has been long overdue. And it's sort of as if like they should have done this like a long time ago. However, if you're not a casual, then you would know that this sort of offense, it's never really been seen before, even from an era like late in the 60s, when the pacing of the game was much faster than when it was in the 80s and the 90s. It showed that like their offense was like, it was very powerful back then in the 60s. Well, not really powerful, but like there was a lot of scoring, and there was abundant amount of scoring in the 60s because the pacing was a little different. And in the NBA now, like the pacing is like similarly like just as fast as it would have been back then. And if you're a casual, you wouldn't really know why the offense is like powerful and like why it's much more potent now. But from the previous years, like since like I'd say from 2014, not even 2014, maybe like 2017 up until now, the teams have been adapting to the fast pacing that Golden State was playing with, because obviously, like we say, Steph Curry changed the game. It's not just an understatement. It is absolute fact. He has definitely changed the game. And part of the change is the pace of the game. And that was the reason why offenses weren't really the same weren't as scoring as much back in the 90s and back in the 80s. And that's something that not many people understand. Like, yes, the three-point shot is part of it. Like, the rise of the three-point shot is part of it. But it's also the spacing that's a part of it. And it's not just the spacing. Like, I meant the pacing. Pardon me. It's the pacing that's part of, and the spacing, that's part of this rise in the offense. Because the game is much faster. Obviously, there's going to be, and like people shoot the ball a lot quicker. Obviously, there's going to be more opportunities for the team to score if both sides are just shooting whichever open shot they can get. So it makes total sense. However, now the NBA is officially reviewing it, so it might not make as much sense as we would have thought if you're not necessarily a casual. And just to bring up some of the examples, in 2013 and 2014, the team average, like for every single team, that the team average was 101 points per game, which is a lot of points per game for like every single team in 2013, 2014. Now, 10 years later, 2023, 2024, the team average has jumped to 115. That is a 14-point jump. And usually, like, obviously this is a 10-year difference, but usually, like, as the years, like, as they've been going, the increase would be steady, and it would be continue to be steady, and sometimes it wouldn't even increase at all. It would probably decrease on certain years. But this rise, it's incredible, like from 110 to 115, and this is like every single team. So it's not just like the star players, it's all the players on the team. it really like it shows like just how far that the NBA has come in just 10 years. And the average player back then is not better than the average player now. It shows how the game has evolved and whatnot. But I believe this this review on the offense and like being a little bit too powerful for this team. It all speculated, or it all started with in January, in my personal opinion. In January, there were 4 players that scored 60-plus points in the span of 4 days. So I covered this previously, but I'll go over it again. Luka Doncic, 73. Joel Embiid, 70. Karl Anthony Towns, 62, ended up losing. And Devin Booker, 62, also ended up losing. So this is a feat. Scoring 60 points is a feat that has only been done by 36 players in the history of the NBA. So we're talking 15-man rosters on 30 different teams. And for 75 plus years of basketball, and you can only pick 36 of those players that have scored 60 plus points. And 4 players did that in the span of 4 days. Like, that is insane. And this isn't the first time that we've seen like some insane things happen. And like last year, we saw Damian Lillard and Donovan Mitchell score 70 points in their respective games, 70 plus points in their respective games. And that was the first time in NBA history that there were 2 players in the same season that scored 70 plus points. Now it was done again this season. So this is the first time in back-to-back years that 2 players have scored 70 plus points in 2 separate occasions. So obviously there's a lot of scoring in this league. Now, Drew Holiday, he had a quote saying, "People like to see players score 60 and 70. How are you going to do that if somebody can be physical?" So he's sort of making the argument that like defenses has sort of let up, and the NBA, I believe what he's hinting at is that not only have the defenses let up, but also the NBA and the refereeing and like the officiating has sort of allowed these players to operate a lot more on the offensive side of the ball. Nick Batum had some quotes. He also, well, not about specifically this matter, but he did say at one point, 70 is the new 50, I guess. So obviously, scoring has been like very abundant in this league. But I want to go back to what Drew Holiday said about how are you going to do that if somebody can be physical? How are you going to score 70, 60 points if somebody can be physical? So I believe he's hinting at the NBA officiating and how lenient they are for offensive players. And what I mean by that is, like, I don't want to completely like talk down on like the NBA and their officiating, but it seems that a lot of the calls that are put in the game and like a lot of the foul calls that you see, they're much more in favor of the offense than it is to the defense. And what I mean by that is most of the time whenever a star player goes up in the paint, they tend to over-exaggerate the kind of contact that's actually being given to them. And Joel Embiid is a perfect example of this. I'll just use Embiid as like the general example since he did score 70 points. So I'll just use him as an example. So defenses, they have to play Embiid much more passively than they would normally in like a pickup game, I guess you could say. Usually in a pickup game, players would press up and they would try to bother the defender in any way, shape, or form that they possibly could. You can't necessarily do that with Embiid, because if Embiid feels bothered with how close you are to him, then he's going to ram his shoulder into your chest. And then when he's about to go up, there's no way to really explain it, but he's just going to do this. Like, every single time he's going to flail his hands up in the air when he's going up for a shot and probably fall on the floor. And when he does that, it's over-exaggerating the contact because most of the time the defenders are usually playing like this. Trae Young does this too. A lot of point guards and a lot of people that take advantage of the offensive game. And Harden, another great example, the one who started this whole thing, he does that as well. And they all do this because they can get away with it with the offense. Harden, when in 2018, he had this very infamous move that no one can stop. I call it the arm hook. So when he's driving to the basket and he goes up for a layup, when the defender's hand is on him, like when the defender is doing this, like just playing defense, like normally because you would put your hand here, and like the hand is over to like the side because like they're spread out. As a defender, you have to do this. What Harden would do is when he's dribbling the ball with his left hand, on his offhand, he will hook his arm around the defender's arm and then try to go up for a shot. Obviously, he can't really go up for the shot because the defender's arm is wrapped around his arm, and then he flails his body. And when he does this, the refs see it, and it's really difficult to see in real time, like because of how fast he does it and how fast the offense is. But he does it in real time. It looks like he's getting fouled, when in reality, that's not what's happening. He's sort of trying to bending like the officiating into his will, which isn't, I'm not trying to knock him down for doing those kinds of things. I'm definitely not trying to knock him down for that because it's allowed. Like the refs are letting it happen. So he's just taking advantage of he's taking advantage of the officiating, which is creative. And I'm not going to knock down the creativity whatsoever. It's just when it's done over and over and over again, and that's how when you generate a lot of your points, it gets a little bit annoying to watch because I want to watch the game. I don't want to watch you at the free throw line just shooting free throws. But that's essentially what these players tend to do. They go up and Joel Embiid especially, they flail around and act like they're getting hit. And the refs see this and they call it as a defensive foul. So maybe this review will sort of like do away with that. However, I'm not entirely sure how much success that would bring because the NBA also implemented a flopping rule where if a player is seen flopping, it's up for interpretation. There's no real definition for what flopping is, and everyone's definition is different. So what one person might consider a flop isn't the same as what another person might consider to be a flop. That's another problem that isn't addressed. But it's up for interpretation. And I haven't really seen that rule really put into place. It was put into place in like the beginning of the season last year and like the beginning this year to show like, oh, this new rule is in place, it's there. But it's not like they really use that rule. And the flopping rule is essentially like if a player is seen flopping, the buckets won't count, and the other team will get technical free throws and receive the ball because he did a non-basketball move. And again, it's up for interpretation on what is a non-basketball move. And not many people are going to agree with another person's definition of it as opposed to their own definition of it. So it's a lot of gray area with that. And that rule, because of that, the rule hasn't really been put into practice as effectively as it should. Because in my opinion, I feel like Embiid should have been hit with the flopping rule several times, but he hasn't in any of the games that I've watched. But with that, we are out of time for our first segment, so we are going to go into the second segment where I talk about Damian Lillard and his comments on the Bucks and where he feels like the Bucks should be in this season. And stay tuned after this short break.